Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have pulled, well, a truly unique stack of sources. It's a global snapshot that covers pretty much everything from uh, contested elections and political arrests across 3 continents.
All the way to deep historical weather events and emerging threats from AI. It's quite the range.
Yeah, it really is.
We're moving fast today, trying to filter through this deluge of information. Everything from exploding atmospheric phenomena to the latest in digital misinformation. The goal really is to connect these things that seem, quite disparate. Try and build a single, cohesive picture of global pressures and, emerging threats.
Right. And our mission, as always, is to quickly deliver the most crucial insights, those surprising connections, maybe some aha moments. We want you to be thoroughly well-informed without having to wrestle through all the original text yourself. Okay, let's unpack this.
So let's start with contested power. We're looking at some high-stakes political arrests, systemic legal challenges that are impacting stability, particularly in Africa and South America.
Okay, let's maybe look at 2 places where the political outcomes show really different kinds of upheaval. First, Tanzania. President Samia Suluhu Hassan was declared the winner with, a staggering 98% of the vote.
Which sounds, statistically remarkable, doesn't it?
It does.
Except the main opposition, Chadema, they were completely barred from the process. They condemned the results as fraudulent. And the reaction from the government seems to have been swift and pretty brutal. We're seeing Chadema's Deputy Secretary General arrested already, and authorities are pursuing 9 others.
And the charges are, frankly, deeply alarming. Over 200 people charged with treason. That's an incredibly serious offense, potentially carrying the death penalty, even though, as you noted, Tanzania hasn't actually executed anyone since, 1995?
That's right, 1995.
Yeah.
And opposition groups, human rights observers, they claim the human cost is just catastrophic. They're reporting over 1,000 deaths during protests. Now, the government dismisses these figures, calls them foreign exaggeration, blames outsiders for the unrest.
Okay, so if Tanzania is a picture of, let's say, entrenched power cracking down, Bolivia seems like the stark opposite, right? A radical, genuine ideological shift.
Exactly, the complete change. Pro-business centrist Rodrigo Paz was just sworn in. And this ends 2 decades of continuous leftist rule. It's a huge shift.
But he's inheriting a really tough economic situation. The source described it as a country devastated, morally and materially indebted.
Yeah, it's putting it mildly. The previous state-led policies, things like generous subsidies, fixed currency rates, they basically drain the country's hard currency reserves. So now you have these chronic fuel shortages, U.S. dollar shortages. It's a mess.
And Paz's promise.
A complete U-turn. He summed it up as capitalism for all.
Yeah.
And this is actually a major geopolitical moment because he's vowing to restore ties with the U.S. and, crucially, open up Bolivia's massive lithium reserves.
The world's largest reserves, right?
The world's largest, to foreign investment. Now, this move could fundamentally shift the global battery supply chain, away from its current concentration in places like Chile and China. It could really invite a new wave of American investment.
Okay. Now, moving north a bit to Guyana in the Caribbean, here we see how wealth and politics are intersecting in this international legal drama. The main opposition leader, Azruddin Mohammed, he's a 38-year-old gold mining mogul. He and his father were arrested.
Right, arrested following a U.S. extradition request.
And Mohammed had, kind of surprisingly, won 16 seats in the recent election. He campaigned on renegotiating Guyana's big oil deal, fighting against what he called tribal voting.
And now he faces 11 charges in a Florida court. Serious charges.
Yeah.
Money laundering, bribery.
And the mechanism the U.S. is using for this extradition request is, it's fascinating, isn't it? This 1931 treaty between the U.K. and the U.S.
It really is. Why does that old date matter now?
Yes.
Well, it matters because that treaty is essentially a relic of colonial power. But it remains the standard legal mechanism for extradition in places like Guyana today. It really highlights the complex, sometimes outdated legal infrastructure that governs international crime in the region. Guyana's Vice President, Jacques Deo, he emphasized how serious the request was, claiming it came directly from U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Right. And Mohammed, meanwhile, claims it's political persecution. He argues some of the alleged offenses aren't even crimes in Guyana.
It's a complex situation.
And it's highly relevant, I think, that we heard Secretary Rubio's name surface there, because let's look at a completely different yet maybe related international legal situation. This one involves a U.S. citizen in the West Bank, Mohammed Ibrahim. He's a Florida teenager, only 16 now, I believe.
Yeah.
Held in an Israeli prison for nearly 9 months.
What's fascinating here, Well, it's how these seemingly local issues get tangled up with international law and superpower influence. He was arrested back in February. The charge, allegedly throwing stones.
Which sounds minor, but...
But under the special West Bank security provisions Israel uses, stone throwing is classified as a very serious offense. It can carry up to 20 years if it's deemed to be targeting a moving vehicle.
And the reports on his detention conditions are, well, they're profoundly difficult to read. The family reports severe weight loss, nearly a third of his body weight, and scabies. Members of Congress are citing signs of torture.
Yeah, it's deeply concerning. And U.S. State Department officials, again, including people connected to Secretary Rubio, are heavily involved. They're trying to navigate this incredibly complex legal and diplomatic mess. But the case is still just stuck in legal limbo.
So putting these pieces together.
This is maybe the critical synthesis point, right? We see the U.S. State Department, and specifically figures linked to the Secretary, actively engaged at the same time in these high-stakes, geopolitically sensitive legal cases. Extradition in South America, detention in the Middle East. It suggests, perhaps, a focused, high-level diplomatic push on these international legal challenges. Kind of reflects how U.S. influence operates in these areas of global instability.
And that kind of geopolitical strain. Well, it often reveals serious cracks back home in domestic systems, doesn't it? We're certainly seeing that crisis hit home, starting with the immediate failure of U.S. air infrastructure. The government shutdown is really hitting air travel hard.
Oh, absolutely. The disruption is immediate and severe. We saw over 1,300 flights grounded for a second day running, over 5,000 delayed nationwide. And the FAA, they've been forced to mandate cuts. Those are set to increase to 10% next week at major airports.
And the root cause is pretty simple, right? Air traffic controllers, airport screeners, they've been forced to work without pay for, what, over 39 days now?
Yeah, over 39 days. And that's leading to massive staffing shortages. You're seeing 20, maybe even 40% of workers just not showing up on a given day. Understandably, perhaps.
Understandably, yeah.
But the ripple effect is just immense. It goes way beyond passenger misery, because nearly half of all U.S. air cargo actually moves in the bellies of commercial passenger planes.
Right. I don't think many people realize that.
No. So when those passenger flights are grounded or delayed, the capacity for moving high-value, time-sensitive cargo just vanishes instantly.
Stuff like medical supplies, electronics, specialized parts.
Exactly. And this capacity crunch, it feeds directly into rising shipping costs and potentially, higher store prices for consumers down the line. It effectively turns what looks like a localized labor issue into a broad economic strain, affecting the cost of living nationwide.
Wow. Okay. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the UK prison system is suffering from a different kind of systemic failure. This one involving paper and outdated procedures, not just labor disputes. We saw reports of 2 prisoners mistakenly released this year.
Yeah, mistakenly released. It sounds almost unbelievable. But one of these releases was purely down to a clerical error. Someone apparently entered a suspended sentence into the computer system instead of the correct custodial sentence.
Just a typo, basically.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
And the Justice Secretary basically admitted they're still relying on, quote, archaic paper-based systems that are contributing to the crisis.
So it highlights this kind of dual systemic crisis.
Yeah.
You've got a political policy pushing for earlier release to ease extreme overcrowding.
Right.
And they're relying on technology that, frankly, predates the internet to process this incredibly high-stakes paperwork.
It's a perfect storm. That combination shows how easily a systemic crisis can be compounded by both outdated tech and, well, political pressure.
Okay, so now let's make a fundamental shift. We're moving from the failure of current systems to lessons in risk and foresight, lessons learned from history, and confronting the risks of the digital future.
Yeah, this is a really interesting pivot.
Today actually marks the 50th anniversary of one of maritime history's really great tragedies, the sinking of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald on Lake Superior, November 10th, 1975. It's just a profound story about technology, nature, and ultimately miscalculation.
Yeah, the Fitzgerald.
Well.
The storm that sank it is known as the Witch of November. It's this specific type of autumn tempest created when lingering warm air collides violently with frigid Arctic fronts moving down.
And it can turn the Great Lakes from, what was the phrase, glass to fury in just hours.
Exactly. Capable of generating waves, maybe 40 feet high. Just enormous.
What's crucial to understand here, I think, is the technology gap back in 1975. Forecasters just didn't have the tools we have now. No satellite imagery, no fine-scale computer models.
Right. They couldn't really detect the dynamics of what we now call a bomb cyclone, this explosive atmospheric vacuum created by high-speed jet streams interacting.
So the crew, including Captain Ernest McSorley, they only had very limited radio chatter between ships. That was their main source of weather info.
And McSorley was, kind of tragically, ironically, on his very last voyage before retirement.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. He radioed the ship trailing behind, the SS Arthur M. Anderson. He reported sustained some topside damage and that the ship had a bad list. His final known words just before the ship vanished from radar: "We are holding our own."
Chilling, just holding their own, minutes before disappearing, taking all 29 crew members, only 17 miles short of safety in Whitefish Bay.
But here's the massive critical legacy of that disaster.
Yeah.
Since the Fitzgerald sank, not a single Great Lakes freighter has been lost to weather. Not one.
That's incredible. So what changed?
Technology. Massive investment in technology. NOAA installed buoy arrays across the lakes, Doppler radar coverage improved, satellite monitoring became routine, plus new ship-based systems, like hull stress modeling in real time. It created an infrastructure that was simply unimaginable in 1975.
So we spent 50 years perfecting the technology needed to see that invisible threat, the bomb cyclone.
Exactly. We learned to see the unseen risk. And what's fascinating here is that we can take that lesson, that hard-won lesson about unseen, rapidly building risk, and pivot directly to the modern digital world, confronting AI deception.
Yeah. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because now we're dealing with a risk that is, by its very nature, invisible or designed to be. These highly realistic AI-generated videos, things like, bunnies on trampolines, or maybe a house cat scaring off a leopard.
Yeah, I've seen some of those. They look incredibly real.
They do. They go viral, and they make it almost impossible for the average person to distinguish between real footage and sophisticated fabrication.
And this isn't just, innocent fun online. It has potentially profound, real-world consequences. Researchers are warning that this kind of hyper-real misinformation leads to a detachment from nature. It leads to misperceptions, like anthropomorphizing animals, giving them human emotions they don't have.
Right.
And it can actively undermine conservation efforts. For example, if you have videos making snakes look purely evil, that might directly impact attempts to protect those ecosystems.
So just as mariners back then had to learn how to spot the early signs of a cyclonic system brewing, you, the informed consumer today, you have to learn how to spot these digital fakes.
Exactly. You have to develop a new kind of literacy. Look for the telltale signs, things like unnaturally smooth movements or actions that seem to defy physics, lighting inconsistencies, shadows that don't quite match.
Or blurring, right, or repeating patterns and fine details like fur or feathers.
Precisely, those little giveaways.
Okay. And finally, we can connect this whole idea of essential foresight, of seeing what's coming, to the career of a pioneer we unfortunately lost recently. Former Top Gear host Quentin Willson.
Ah, yes, Quentin Willson.
Willson was someone who championed technological foresight decades ago. He was an early, really vocal proponent of electric vehicles.
Way back in the 1990s, right?
Yeah.
He famously championed General Motors' EV1 electric car.
He did. The EV1, which was, a fascinating technological experiment that ultimately failed politically and commercially, GM crushed most of them.
Yeah, they did. But Willson didn't stop there, did he?
No, he kept going. He worked tirelessly through his Fair Charge campaign, trying to make EVs affordable for everyone.
His whole career, really, much like the safety infrastructure built after the Fitzgerald, it proves that you have to invest in foresight. You have to invest in seeing the future risk or the future opportunity, even when the initial technology or the initial investment maybe doesn't pan out immediately. He was always ahead of the curve.
He really was. So we've ranged across an incredible spectrum today. I mean, from high-stakes political instability being managed or attempted to be managed by U.S. State Department involvement.
Right, through the fragility of domestic systems under serious strain, whether it's air travel or prisons.
And then these profound lessons of risk learned from 50 years of maritime history applied now to the digital age.
This raises an important question.
Yeah, it really does. The sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald taught us a hard, cold lesson, didn't it?
Wow.
We absolutely need advanced technology to understand risks like that, bomb cyclone risks that can build invisibly and strike almost instantly. So given the rapid global proliferation of undetectable AI-generated reality, what unpredictable bomb cyclone risks are we currently sailing into when it comes to trusting the very information we consume every day? What fundamental technological foresight do we lack today that will seem glaringly obvious 50 years from now, looking back?
That is definitely something to mull over.
Until our next deep dive.